as it is 5:30, and we do have a quorum. So if you don't mind standing, we'll start with the acknowledgement of country. The City of Victor Harbor acknowledges the Ramangeri and the Ngarrindjeri people as the traditional custodians of the lands and the waters we live in and work. We acknowledge their deep connection to country, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. This respect is extended to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across Australia.
The City of Victor Harbor is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. We respect people of all ages, abilities, genders, sexualities, religions, cultures and backgrounds.
I'm giving the service acknowledgement, which is quite appropriate considering it's Anzac Day tomorrow, and I think it's quite relevant that we recognise the brave individuals who have served and continue to serve our nation. Remember those who have lost their lives, pay the ultimate sacrifice to our country.
Almighty God, we ask you to bless this council and allow it to be an agent of change to the people of this city and beyond. Direct and prosper its deliberations to the honouring of your name, the welfare of the people who it serves. Amen.
Please be seated. Welcome everybody. I do have some apologies. That's Councillor Burns, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Mann are not here tonight. For those that are here, can I just remind you of the requirements of disclosure of material or general conflicts of interest? Just as that item comes up, if you just pop your hand up and let me know that you have a conflict, then we can get the forms to you and you can let us know how you want to deal with that conflict. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is whoever moves the motion, when you close the debate, can you please make sure that you don't add any other issues or any other points to that. Closing of the debate is a rebuttal to the argument that is there before. And so we need to follow the meeting procedures, and I will be calling a point of order if new information is brought in closing the debate. Just a reminder for elected members, those in the gallery and those that are listening online, we do have the dawn service at 5:45 tomorrow, and it's a really important day to remember those, as Councillor Kemp said when he read the service acknowledgement, to remember those individuals who have served and continue to serve our nation and our community. The other piece of notice I'd given you, some of you might have seen that the coronation of King Charles III is going to be screened through our historic, at our historic Victor Cinema on the coronation day, which is the 10th, I think it is, in the evening. And so that will be a great community event. Unfortunately, the CEO and myself can't attend that one, so Councillor Kemp, you may have to act on my behalf then. We've been invited to watch the coronation with the Governor at Government House, which is a great honour for the City of Victor Harbor to be asked for that. I'd also like to let the members know that I'm foreshadowing a motion without notice that we support administration in investigating getting the gather round here in Victor Harbor. It's been announced that that's going to happen for another 3 years. Our Victor Harbor Oval has lighting that supports AFL games, and so I will be putting in a motion on notice that we investigate lobbying the government in order to do that. So let's go to item 4, items adjourned and lying on the table. We don't have any of those. And item 5 is the recommendation that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 27th of March be confirmed as true and accurate. Does somebody want to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And I have a second of that. Thank you, Councillor Karimba. Do either of you have any questions or anything you'd like to say about the minutes? Does anybody have any questions about those minutes? If not, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We do have 3 deputations, which is always great to hear from our community. The first deputation is from Justin Biddle from the Wildlife Centre, and Justin's their team leader. And I welcome Justin to come up and take a seat. And there's 2 of you there, then both of you come up and take a seat. Sorry, I only have Justin's name down here. You have 10 minutes for your deputation, and that also includes question time as well from the floor. So you may want to make it 8 minutes or so that you get a couple of questions in. But please, I look forward to hearing what you have to say.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Rena Robinson, and I'm the Chair of Wildlife Welfare. And as Moira said, this is Justin Biddle, and he's the team leader of our Wildlife Rescue Centre. And the purpose of the deputation this evening is to request partial financial funding in order to purchase an emergency response vehicle to carry out our critical work. Just a bit of background. WWO is a highly respected and professional wildlife rescue and rehabilitation group operating on the Fleurieu Peninsula. This organisation provides a free 24/7 community service within the city of Victor Harbor and the Alexandrina Council areas. We receive no reliable or regular funding for its operations, with all monies being raised through various fundraising activities that enables us to purchase critical equipment which is required on a daily basis. We know that South Australians value our unique wildlife and is recognised as a major part of the attraction to visit this area. It is therefore reasonable to infer the significant intrinsic and economic value of our wildlife. Last year, WWO responded to over 3,000 calls from the community for information or advice. And we also rescued and cared for 1,200 injured or orphaned animals at the Wildlife Rescue Centre based in Goolwa. Approximately 40% of these rescues being from the Victor Harbor area. And many of these rescues are carried out after hours on weekends and public holidays. So as a volunteer-driven organisation, WWO volunteers dedicate innumerable hours to the care of injured wildlife. This is not a recreational activity, nor a hobby, nor a fun day to socialise with friends. Wildlife carers are first responders, and like all first responders, provide a critical 24/7 service. These carers provide a trauma, triage, rescue and rehab service for injured animals, and they work tirelessly under the weight of community expectations. This work is physically, mentally, emotionally and financially draining, yet expected by the community to be available in emergency and non-emergency scenarios. This work is generally undervalued, unappreciated, underpaid and under the radar. These critical services are not provided by any local or state government bodies, requiring rescue groups to take on the risk management of many wildlife tasks not supported at these government levels. WWO need to ensure the validity, sustainability and resilience of the organisation. Costs of operations are many and varied. Medical diagnosis and treatment, food, drugs, equipment are many of the daily costs that need to be covered. The overall cost to sustain its critical service is approximately $110,000 per year. This includes the cost of running the Wildlife Rescue Centre based in Goolwa, vehicle costs, electricity and governance costs. The major source of funds is provided by our 2 volunteer-run fundraising shops in Goolwa and Victor, and these sources cover our operational costs but leave us with no extra capital. We believe that most people are not even aware that our service costs us thousands of dollars. No, it's not free. We simply cannot afford to divert any more fundraising activity away from our frontline services. Whilst you may be under the assumption that injured animals just sit in the one spot and offer no resistance to being caught, nothing could be further from the truth. Many items of specialised equipment are required by the rescue team to be able to achieve some of these complex rescues. These include equipment such as nets, nooses, net launchers, waders, kayaks, PPE, fishing tackle equipment, transport cages large enough for animals such as pelicans and kangaroos, along with smaller cages for birds, possums and lizards. The rescue team are out on the road every single day responding to calls for injured, sick and distressed animals. Most professional wildlife rescue groups operate emergency rescue response vehicles fitted out with the necessary equipment. Our rescue vehicle is a critical component of our service to the community. Our current vehicle is more than 10 years old and travels approximately 40,000 kilometres per year in the course of providing its animal service. The odometer reading on our current vehicle stands at 312,000 kilometres, and we have been advised by our mechanical service provider that there are large expense items that need to be attended to and to plan for a new vehicle. The purchase of this current vehicle was made available 6 years ago through a generous bequest. The vehicle that seems to address the specialised needs of our rescue work is the Toyota Hiace long wheelbase or similar as shown in the photo. The vehicle will then need to be fitted out appropriately and badged with the WWO logo and phone number. WWO has already started to seek funding for a new vehicle and has established a partnership with Petlet Holiday Homes, a Fleurieu-based company. Here in the next slide is Melinda Main, the founder of Petlet Holiday Homes, to express her support for a new vehicle for WWO.
My name is Melinda. We are a property service somewhere around 11 guests each year on the road. We know that those guests are car, most driving down from the road, fishing off the rocks, they out in their boats. Victor Harbour and encounter. We also know that that activity mostly incidentally, causes harm to our local wildlife. We feel a sense of obligation to support, to try and assist them in their work in our local. Such important to have them doing that work in a local business. We feel help and we'll be doing as many other local businesses. Such a valuable service they provide.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. So the request that we're seeking is that we would like to recognise and thank the City of Victor Harbour for their previous support over the last 2 financial years. And the plan for this funding is to spread the cost of the financial support 3 ways. So both local councils, Victor Harbour and Alexandrina, and the business sector. So this is how we envisage the financial support across all the sectors to achieve the amount of money that we need for the response vehicle. So the contribution we'll be asking for the City of Victor Harbour is $15,000, the same from Alexandrina Council, and the $10,000 which has already been committed by Petlet Holiday Homes. So that was very, very good.
2 minutes left.
Okay,
Thank you.
Nearly there. So we propose that Council receive and note the request for funding support to purchase an emergency response vehicle. There is no one else in this area that can provide this work. There's no one that can undertake it, and the work requires specialised skills, knowledge and equipment. So just one very last bit to say, the return on your investment. So we estimate the value of our wildlife rescue and rehab service to the local community to be in excess of $1.3 million per year. based on specialised care of animals, medications, food and fluid therapy, and the thousands of hours of volunteer engagement. This is an astonishingly large volunteer commitment to the local community. So thank you for listening to our deputation, and that provides a small snapshot of the work we do on a daily basis.
Thank you. We probably have time for one question if somebody's got a question that they'd like to ask Renea. Thank you.
Rena and Justin, I'd just like to acknowledge your fantastic work. I have the pleasure of helping you help wildlife a lot, and you do fantastic work. So I think the pretty reasonable cost you're asking for is well justified.
Thank you, Dr. Quinton.
Thank you very much. We won't be able to tonight make a motion or a recommendation to fund the wildlife rescue. It will need to come as a motion on notice or during the budget deliberations that we'll be having. So I just thought I'd let you know that. We now have a deputation from Bronwyn Lewis. Bronwyn, if you know the routine. Thank you. And once again, you have 10 minutes. And if you have time, then we'll get some questions for you.
I'll just get my gear together. Okay, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. Councillor Corimba, is that the correct pronunciation? And I gave a deputation to Alexandrina Council last week, which you may have seen a nice write-up in the Fleurieu Sun. We have been working as an affordable housing committee for some time, so I'll quickly flip through. At the August 2020 Homeless Forum by Fleurieu Foundation at Kyneton, which Your Worship spoke at, a group of us got together after that and formed an affordable housing committee. Rebecca Sharkey attended a meeting early in 21, and we also note that the Fleurieu Foundation has set up a homeless committee, which I'm also on, but they have very different focuses. In 2021, Malayan District Community Association decided they were going to investigate to become a housing provider, and we saw land in Malayan, particularly because there's a lot of people living in the caravan park there, as a good pilot to look at what we could do. So this is a federal issue, which is everyone's problem. The NGA, which is the local government conference each year in Canberra, had a discussion paper talking about this as a federal problem with local delivery. The House of Representatives Standing Committee on Tax and Revenue is leading an inquiry into the contribution of tax and regulation around housing affordability and supply in Australia. And here in SA, we've got the State Parliamentary Inquiry, which I'm very pleased to say that Victor Harbour is already working on a submission to. Our committee is working on a submission, and in our deputation last week, we suggested that Alexandrina Council should also put in a submission to this inquiry. It's critical when you see some of the figures. So the former ALGWA president, David O'Loughlin, who is also the mayor of Prospect in the last term, has recently been appointed to the federal government's new National Housing Supply and Affordability Council. There was an article in ALGWA that you will get through your emails that you get, and there are no reliable linkages between population growth, overseas migration rates and demand for housing. So the main message to Council is to be aware of this issue and to own it. The LGA state election platform last year is that councils have a role in bringing the stakeholders together. So for us to enable local solutions, we're asking each council to commit to working in partnership. RDA has reported that a statewide regional investment pipeline of $36.35 billion projected over 5 years if workers can be housed. So there's a real economic benefit for us to be involved in housing now. So SAROC also has a policy toolkit, and it will come as no surprise to people living in the Fleurieu, where a great percentage of our population is over 60, that there's an absence of 1 and 2 bedroom dwellings. And we need, in order for housing to accommodate our ageing population, we need to vacate larger dwellings and potentially facilitate the regional migration of families to help us with workforce and also to build our economy. The lack of affordable housing for rental purchase, it's everywhere. It's not just here. So South Australian regional dwelling prices increased by a significant 13.2% in the last 12 months. And another consequence is that there's been a huge reduction in rental properties. This is for a variety of reasons, not just people coming to the area, but also Airbnb. But currently, as you probably know, there are very few rental properties available and waiting lists all around. So a SAROC policy toolkit is establishing how South Australian councils may make the best out of the National Housing Infrastructure Facility, which is $1 billion facility that offers concessional loans to councils, grants and equity funding for eligible infrastructure projects. There is already some happening in our state. Tatiara, I think that's how you pronounce it, District Council, which is around Keith and Bordertown. They've already started building accommodation in their caravan parks. They're looking at not just 2-bedroom but 4-bedroom properties. And they're also establishing a temporary housing register, which is really critical, listing spare rooms for lodging for workers, transient workers, but also for victims of domestic violence. And they're also looking at a deferred payment policy for development infrastructure. I have sent this deputation to council so you can have all these figures. The net effect of our post-COVID immigration is that during COVID we had a loss, but during the region that experienced the greatest growth was the Fleurieu and Kangaroo Island, with 3,756 more people coming to the area. South Australia's share of the NOM intake has traditionally averaged about 4 to 5% annually over the past 4 decades. However, we know from articles in the Australian and some of the information that the federal government has circulating, that we're looking at a net influx of 350,000 people during the worst rental crisis in generations. So we have to be on the front foot of building stock now. The opportunity cost, just 20% of this pipeline from RDA would create 25,000 jobs over the period. In addition, the document highlights that 1,941 job vacancies were estimated in regional South Australia, a figure which has grown by 73% over the previous 12 months. So we know that a lot of these vacancies exist because there's no housing. The evident risk is that if regional housing shortages are not alleviated, this significant pipeline may not eventuate, with adverse consequences for regional economies and reduced economic diversity. We know that a diversity of housing creates a regional vibrancy and community wellbeing. Council's role, and this is where I'm asking you to start talking. I'm not asking you for money, I'm asking you to start talking. Implement a range of residential zones to facilitate diverse housing stock, i.e. look for properties with smaller houses for 1 to 2 people. Mandate affordable housing units in developments of a certain size. For example, I live in Middleton, there's a development of 52 houses going forward. I suggest that 2 of those could be built by the developer and be available for a housing provider to manage. Incentivise affordable housing units through trade-offs and concessions like Tatiara has done, and sell or donate surplus land that you may have. And I understand Victor doesn't have the same kind of land quantities as Alexandrina, but sometimes there are bits of land around that you
You have 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Thanks, Bronwyn.
it's all right. I'm on the last page. So the issues and the critical things that I want you to consider. Currently, the Planning and Design Code, it talks about affordable housing and the criteria for 15% affordable housing in a large development. This is not detailed. There is no content around this for you to be able to negotiate with developers. So what I'd like to see is councils building bylaws that say how you want that 15% affordable housing to be managed, and to look for council land that is that could be used for affordable housing. So basically, I'm asking you to chat.
Thank you very much, Bronwyn, and I can assure you that we are chatting. As you know, we're part of the Housing Roundtable here. We work closely with Junction. We had the Minister down here, and I believe she's coming back at some stage to talk about how we can stop people actually getting into that housing. So very much that preventative model as well. And the Local Government Association is doing quite a lot of work. We've got time for one question. If somebody has a question for Bronwyn.
No, oh, one, yeah.
Councillor Karembo.
Thank you. Thank you, Bronwyn, for your deputation. We both know it's a big issue. We know, and I've been watching this across the country, it's getting worse. It's not going to get any better. And as much as you're asking us to talk, I also think that we need to actually take some action, because we can sit here and do roundtables and talk to the cows come home. People are going to be coming whether we like it or not, and we just got to try and alleviate that issue as best as we can.
And one of the things that discussion will bring is your own policies for Victor Harbor about what affordable housing looks like for Victor Harbor. That's what I've asked Alexandrina to go back and look at, that component in the Act where you have control over that 15 or 20% of affordable housing in developments, so that you can dictate what affordable housing looks like for Victor Harbor.
Thank you very much. And we have one more deputation, Brian Litley. And Brian, as I said to the other two, 10 minutes, including questions, and you know the score.
Don't mind me if I grab a drink of water. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. I come here with strong support from the farming community of Back Valley, with the hope that this council will make some positive decisions that will result in long overdue action regarding critical infrastructure for our community and the broader agricultural sector. When granted this deputation, it was advised that I could provide you with handouts or put a presentation up here on the big screen, should I seek to. I have neither for you, but I can though assure you that any statement I make in this deputation is supported by fact, and should you have any queries on any point, I'm happy to provide that supporting information. The catalyst for me being here on behalf of residents of Back Valley is a recent call made in this chamber to defer from the 2023-24 budget allocation for the replacement of the Keene Road Bridge. It's a total figure of around 800,000, 400,000 of which would be funded with the grant, which now stands to be lost. It was suggested as part of the decision to remove this item from the budget, now the third or fourth time the Keene Road Bridge replacement has been pushed out of a budget, while engineering reports deem the replacement necessary, that is not needed and that doesn't have to be done until 2032. It was suggested that the 800,000 of expenditure, which is actually $400,000 if you take the grant out, would be best kept in the budget for a healthier bottom line. I'm here tonight to appeal to Council to reconsider that decision to defer the Keene Road Bridge project as you progress to the final budget. My request comes with a majority of expressed support of residents and landowners on Keene Road, exceptionally strong support from the wider Back Valley community, and significant support from farmers and agricultural contractors from outside of the valley. Our justification for this appeal to Council is to act with responsibility and to ensure this project goes ahead and is completed as part of the 2023-24 budget, and no later, includes the following. Safety. The bridge has been determined to be in need of replacement. It was identified as such several years ago and has since endured significant high water events, which most certainly would not have improved its structural integrity. Again, on safety, localised flooding around the bridge, including the threat to 2 residences and several sheds, has increased in frequency due to debris trapped under the bridge. Council works crews last year were required to unplug the bridge following the November 12 High River event. There is a high level of concern regarding flooding of 2 homes, but also now the regular significant damage to the roadway on the bridge approaches. Safety point number 3. The load limit of the bridge at 22.5 tonne raises concerns regarding emergency vehicles. Senior CFS officials state it is likely bulk water tankers, critical and rural firefighting where mains water is not available, which is in this area, would be restricted from crossing the bridge on Keene Road. Keene Road, as a public road, is an important avenue in the local CFS firefighting response, with the western end of the road considered a significant hotspot. It is imperative Keene Road is maintained in a manner that gives CFS every opportunity to combat a bushfire threat to Back Valley and Victor Harbour. Yes, it may well be that perfect bad storm of flood or fire producing that has that bridge and escape route out at a time of emergency for any of the 13 permanent residents of Keene Road and many more campers, caravanners and bushwalkers on any given day. But is in the realm of possibility, and Council has the reports to say the bridge is a risk. Productivity. Our own business, Victor Harbour Group, just last week held talks with road transport leaders and primary producer heads in the region to discuss the need for access to our roadways by larger and heavier transport to be more efficient and competitive as a sector. Already my own farming operations and those of my neighbours and also non-farming hobbyist residents of the area have been affected by the weight restrictions of the bridge and impacted financially due to increased transport costs and/or time taken to perform tasks. Consultation. I should be here with the confidence that the consideration to remove this budget item was made with all councillors working with all the information required. You should all know the impact of the decision on the affected ratepayers and general public, and not just the outcome of the budget or for the budget. I should be here with that confidence, but I'm not, because I know as a primary producer and resident in the immediate area, I was never asked how it impacts me if this bridge upgrade is not forthcoming. And I'm told by the majority of my Keene Road neighbours that they also have not been asked. Where is the consultation and how can you make a decision of such significance without it? Reputational risk. There is significant reputational risk to council should the Keene Road Bridge, a project the previous council committed to after delaying it twice, be deferred once again. Not only would the grant funding of $400,000 for a project council must do at some point be lost, but $400,000 of council funds won't be spent in this region, regional council's agricultural heartland on a key piece of road infrastructure. It would seem also that it won't be spent on any infrastructure in the council district, but merely to make the books look better. Common sense should tell you that the Keene Road Bridge is not an item to be deferred from your 2023 budget, and that it should be a priority. The bridge though, the bridge is just a small part of the infrastructure critical to the City of Victor Harbour's agricultural sector, majority of which is located in the Waipinga, Back Valley, Inman Valley and High Marsh Valley regions. Part of Councillor Kemp's reasoning for the Keene Road Bridge being able to stay was that it is so small. It may or may not prove to be an Achilles heel if left untouched, and I can relate to some of the comments had in your recent debate on the topic. It may be the least of our problems. Our network of unsealed roads though, this important rural, through this important rural landscape is gangrenous, and I've seen bugger all spent on it in my time back in this region. That needs to change. So thank you for presenting the platform to address this critical need by once again moving to take away funds from the infrastructure you should be investing in. I'll concentrate on Keene Road, Tugwell Road and Crompton Road due to my stronger understanding of how the farming community and contractors use this network for their operations, and because of the insight I have from my observations and conversations. Keene Road is part of the Hyson Trail, cutting through significant farms and therefore supporting a mix of farming machinery, residential commuter traffic, lots of pedestrian traffic and plenty of bike riders. It is a busy road, and I remind you, a key route for the CFS brigades. It's actually the original roadway bullock track linking Victor with Inman Valley and Yankalilla. I'm sure you all knew that. Well, the majority of the time, this busy shared public road still seems like a bullock track. While council's work crews try their best with the annual grade of the road, it is the case that very little in terms of materials to actually build up the unsealed road has been committed. Even the best road workers, and we do have some of the best road workers here in this council, can't do much with nothing to work with. This road a few years back had repurposed crushed Ocean Street pavers used for a section. I myself had 3 wrecked 4-wheel drive tyres in the space of a month as a result of that. The roadside trimming program is sporadic, and while the last cut around the start of 2022 was good, it stopped at the halfway point of the road. While blame was equally apportioned to myself and another driver for an expensive head-on crash I had in that section of roadway, it was determined that the fact we crashed on a blind corner in the section of the road where there had been no roadside trimming. It still hasn't been trimmed, hasn't been cut back. You can't see in large sections of that road at all for two-way traffic. Tugwell Road, which links with Keene Road and completes the common farmer and ag contractor journey from Inman Valley to Waipenga, staying off the busy sealed Inman Valley Road and taking many trucks, tractors and other farm vehicles away from the Newland Town roundabout.
2 minutes, Brian.
Yep, is as corrugated and gouged as Keene Road. Council recently saw the value of Tugwell and Keene Roads as traffic avenues by diverting traffic onto them during the Victor Harbour triathlons. Please don't do that again. It's bad enough having people with no idea how to drive on unsealed roads, tearing along them as much as they already do without council encouraging it. And Crompton Road at the other end of the valley, another heavily used road for agricultural traffic, linking multiple and separate farm holdings across the districts, and also a key time-saving link to Range Road and the Waipenga CFS station for the Lower Inman Brigade. It is in terrible state and most often is. Your farmers are individually significant ratepayers and collectively the economic drivers for this region. We're not asking you to build us footpaths, maintain a road verge, slash a vacant block, water or mow our neighbourhood playground. We're not even asking you to seal our roads. We just want our roads and their infrastructure maintained to the standard they are supposed to be so that we can play our important role in this community safely and efficiently.
Thank you, Brian. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lidley? Councillor Corimbo.
Thank you, Brian, for coming down and telling us about that road. I've driven that road and it does need some work. I've got a question for you. You said it's predominantly farming that uses that road. Is that right?
No, it's mixed use. It has literally thousands of walkers, hundreds of cyclists through that avenue all the time. It's a Hyson Trail. It's a very, very busy road. It's a shared traffic. Yes, there's a lot of farm vehicles use it. Yeah. But not only the vehicles that are attached to the farms along that road. It is a major thoroughfare. It is a safer route for taking tractors. Contractors use it. You need to move.
Have you seen caravans up and down that?
Caravans are up there all the time.
Do you know if there's a caravan RV park up there, or?
There is a caravan RV park up there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And a campground.
Thank you very much. We now move to questions from the gallery, and I had a question from Mr. Blatchford. Mr. Blatchford, your questions have been refused. They are in relation to matters that are currently before the courts and subject to legal advice. This is something that you are fully aware of. Furthermore, statements made within your preamble are objectionable and derogatory towards council staff and elected members, and this is the reason why your questions have been refused. We also, you have got a copy of that was emailed to you earlier on this afternoon. Thank you. This is not time for discussion, Mr. Blatchford. Councillor Mr. Robertson, you had some questions. Would you like to come up and ask your questions? Mr. Robertson.
Mayor Jenkins, may I ask a question? What's the protocols about receiving questions from the gallery given to councillors, whether they are received or not received?
If Mr. Blatchford sent them to all the councillors, you should have them. I'm happy to put them in the elected member update on Friday. Thank you, Mr. Blatchford. You can sit down. Does that answer your question, councillor Kemp?
Yes, I just want to know what the process was,
Yeah.
which is involved. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson.
Thank you for the opportunity to ask these two short questions to the council. My first one is that the patterns of people movement on and across the causeway is crucial information to both the City of Victor Harbor for analysing tourism and Victor traffic at a minimum, but also to the conservation of wildlife on Granite Island. My question is, can the City of Victor Harbor install an infrared beam people counter on the causeway?
We can certainly take that question on notice, as we'll need to follow up with both DIT and DEW, as both parties are involved in the causeway and people movement to the island. So we can follow that up.
Thank you. Question 2 is basically at present, as I've highlighted several times this year, there is no management on Granite Island of the facilities, the wildlife over there. The only activity that is got any management to it is the City of Victor Harbor's own horse-drawn tram, but the island itself has no management being provided. And I ask once again, the question is, has the City of Victor Harbor been informed about when the Department of Environment is going to release the conservation plans for wildlife on Granite Island?
And unfortunately, Mr. Robertson, our answer is exactly the same. The City of Victor Harbor has not received any formal notification of the release of the Granite Island Master Plan or conservation plans to date. We do believe they're imminent, and as soon as we get them, we will let you know. But as we said to you last time, we haven't received anything.
A supplementary question to you then, Mayor, is that are we actively pursuing, or are we sitting back waiting for the Department of Environment for those questions, or the answers?
We have asked the department, I think I'm aware of a couple of occasions, and as I said, we do believe the plans are imminent. I'm getting my N's and M's mixed up tonight, but we have not received any formal notification of the release. Thank you. We now move to item 8.1, which is the petition relating to Hindmarsh Road traffic movement. And I'll take the first recommendation, which is receiving and noting the Hindmarsh Road. Councillor Schiller.
I have a general conflict of interest on this topic. I actually live on Wattle Drive, so I think I will leave for the entire debate and return afterwards.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schiller. Does Oreo have to go too? The first recommendation is that Council receive and note the Hindmarsh Road traffic movement request for roundabout or traffic light petition. Councillor Schofield moving that way and Councillor Kemp seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? The second recommendation is that Council include $85,000 in the draft 2023-24 capital budget for the design and installation of separate turning lanes. Would someone like to move that way? Moving that way, Councillor Kemp.
I have a question, if you don't mind, please, Mayor, before I think about moving it. There's design installation of separate turning lanes at Wattle Drive. That's on the Department of Infrastructure and Transport Road. Shouldn't they be doing that, not council? It's not our funding, not our requirement.
Kathy, can you answer that?
Yes, DIT is responsible for the main road and council is responsible for Wattle Drive though.
The question then is what part of Wattle Drive needs to be with line marking compared to DIT Road? And because do both, sorry, and my apologies for interrupting you there, Director Hayter, and do both designs have to be done at the same time?
And just bear with me for 2 secs.
What I might do is move to that third recommendation while Director Hayth is looking for that to save some time, if you're all happy with that. You happy with that? So the third recommendation is the administration requests that the Department for Infrastructure and Transport develop concept plans and costings for the roundabout at the intersection of Hindmarsh Road and Cudmore Road, as recommended in the long-term option in the 2020 Hindmarsh Road Traffic Investigation Report. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Kemp.
In the 2020 Hindmarsh Traffic Report, it spoke about $7 million for the Wattle, and they weren't really keen to do this. I would imagine Cudmore will be the similar costs, so it'll be a $40 million request from our council for them to build 2 roundabouts. I'm not quite sure that will be a waste of time for that, but I guess it doesn't hurt asking the question. So I'm just confirming, is that correct that the costs were around about $7 million for the Wattle Drive designs?
Through the Mayor, if I may, I'm unaware of the exact costings, but I knew it was in the higher millions of doing both of the roundabouts. And yes, you're right, they weren't particularly keen on those installations when we asked last time. Just also to note, normally when petitions do come in, the council is required to receive and note them. There is no provision in our asset management plan or long-term financial plan for either of these projects. However, they are both been long-term issues raised by our community. The council can choose just to receive and note the petition for this at this current time, and also seek for the administration to further consult with DIT in regards to its intentions at this stage. But yeah, the additional cost, or the $85,000, is council funds to try and address the issue in the medium to short term. Certainly not long term addressing it.
I'll move the third recommendation.
You'll move the third recommendation. Does somebody want to second the third recommendation? Thank you very much, Councillor Quinton. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
I think it's in the best interest of our community, since the petition's been brought to us to look at this problem on Hindmarsh Road, that our administration writes to the Department of Infrastructure and get their feedback on what are their desires to actually look at this and actually do it and build it for us, similar to the Crozier roundabout. So I think we won't lose anything by this, but I think it's good that we get an answer back.
Thank you. Councillor Quinton, did you want to speak to it? No. Does anybody else want to speak to it? Councillor Karimbo?
I just have a question. So are we moving the motion? We're talking about the motion number 3 here, or
yes,
the one?
Number 3.
Because what you said was different, I think. No, number 3. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else want to speak to it? You're clear that it's recommendation 3 that we're talking about? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We now move back to recommendation 2, and I wonder whether, Kathy, you're able to answer Councillor Kemp's question?
Thank you. Through the Mayor, sorry for the delay. I was just looking at the design document here. And yes, it looks like those lanes are on High Marsh Road.
So I now move to, if somebody can move recommendation 2. If recommendation 2 is not moved, then it lapses for want of a mover. Councillor Kemp, moving that way?
Yes, I'll move it with an amendment.
And your amendment is?
Just trying to just bear with me for a sec. The council contacts DIT to look at the design and installations of separate turning lanes at Wattle Drive, etc., etc. So it's just changing, deleting, including 85,000 in the draft 23-24 capital budget. Just saying that council contacts DIT for the design and installation of separate turning lanes, etc.
I just need to have a think about that, because that changes the whole recommendation. So it's not an amendment. That's what I'm saying, that it's not an amendment because you're changing the whole motion. It's actually a motion. So we'll go with this motion that's written there.
I'll move a new one.
Alternate. So if you don't want to move this, then you can move an alternate recommendation. If there's no mover or seconder for this one, I'll just wait until Councillor Quinton and Councillor Schofield finish talking. If there's no mover for this motion and it lapses for lack of a mover, you can actually move a second one.
So yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I thought I tried to move the motion. I put my hand up, so I need to withdraw my motion with the leave of the meeting. Even though I tried to amend it at the same time, but I did actually get accepted as a mover.
Okay, yep. So you're happy to move it? Yep. Do I have a seconder for the motion? I thought you just said that you moved it.
No, I said I moved it. Now I'm removing it.
You're now okay. I beg your pardon.
Thank you.
Fine. All right. So that motion is lapsed for want of a mover. Did you have an alternative motion, Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yes, that the council contacts DIT for the design and installation of the separate turning lanes at Wattle Drive as recommended in the medium-term option in the 2020 High Marsh Road traffic.
It should be to undertake the design and installation, design of installation, design and. Are you happy with that motion? The council requests it to undertake the design and installation of separate turning lanes at Wattle Drive.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that, Councillor Schofield? Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Yes, I think this is a good opportunity for council to contact it and provide an alternative solutions roundabout with some designs of lanes, etc., markings, so that we get some solution for our residents in the meantime, and see what happens in the future and how we can develop roundabouts for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Schofield, do you want to speak to that?
Yes, I will. Look, I realise the importance of assisting our community in this particular area. I guess my concern is looking at, you know, we're looking at nearly $8 million for roundabouts and the turning lanes, $8 million is a hell of a lot of money. So I'd like to think that we can approach DIPS, just see what the outcome is. Can we really afford $8 million? And on the other hand, if we lose a life's worth more than $8 million.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to speak to this? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you very much. Can someone bring Angela back in? Thank you. And I think that that's a good recommendation, Councillor Kemp. This is an issue, a very long-term issue that's only going to get worse with further development in that area. And I know for Wattle Drive families and people coming out onto the main road, it is quite problematic. So I think well done to the unanimous vote. We now move to 9.1, outstanding resolutions, and the recommendation is that Council receive and note the outstanding resolutions report. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Corembo. And seconding that, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you have any questions or any discussion? Does anybody have any questions or any discussion about the outstanding resolutions? Put it to the vote then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now come to 9.2, which is the review of our bylaws. We have got Paul Kelly, who most of you have met before, who's the lawyer that was providing us with legal information in relation to that. Nice to have you on the screen there, Paul. Because Paul is on the screen, it's really important that when he is talking, because he's actually, I think, on his phone, that nobody else talks, otherwise it cuts him off. But if you have got any questions in relation to the bylaws, Paul's there to help you. I will now go through the first recommendation, and also remember that these bylaws are coming for the purposes of community consultation, as guided by the communication strategy that is in your attachments. So would somebody like to move the first recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Do either of you want to speak to the first recommendation? No. Does anybody want to speak to the first recommendation? In that case, I'll put it to those in favour. That's carried unanimously. The second recommendation is that Council endorse draft bylaw number 5, dogs, as provided attachment E for the purposes of community consultation. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Quinton?
Can I just state a general conflict of interest for two recommendations to 3.A and 3.B, as I work as a vet and am involved with animals, but I would like to stay in the chamber and vote on these matters.
Thank you. And you're moving recommendation 2? Do I have a seconder for recommendation 2? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Quinton, do you want to speak to it? No. Does anybody want to speak to it or have any questions? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm not supporting this bylaw, and I've raised a couple of issues around nuisance dogs to be recorded in the bylaws, and I've had consultation back from administration. Fine, I accept what you've written, but to ask our community to go to Dog and Management Act to look up what nuisance dogs are like and how you manage them, which is a bit unfair. We want to keep our communication simple to our community. If we can have a bylaw that talks about nuisance dogs, which they are, there are a lot of dogs in this town who bark a lot and upset families and neighbours, etc. But there's nothing in the bylaw about how nuisance dogs are dealt with, apart from the Dog and Management Act. So I think it's a bit unfair. I think we should keep it simple and keep our people informed appropriately. So that's why I won't support this one.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. I might ask Mr. Kelly if he might be able to respond to that, as he is a professional in addressing these bylaws. Did you hear what Councillor Kemp was saying, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, I did, Mayor.
Would you like to respond to the query that he's got?
If I understand the query and the position of Councillor Kemp, he wishes to have placed within the draft dog bylaw number 5 of 2023 a definition of what a nuisance dog is, and I imagine make it a law in the bylaw that gives the council power to make orders and enforce the provisions relating to nuisance dogs, i.e. barking and throwing itself at the fence, etc. But I can't draft a bylaw which is duplicitous of the Dog and Cat Management Act, and I think Section 45 deals specifically with exactly that proposition. And I don't think the Legislative Review Committee would allow me to allow the council to have a draft which would repeat the provisions of the Act. My apologies if I haven't read that correctly, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you for your explanation, sir. And it really is along the lines of simplifying the communication for our community instead of them going through a number of documents to find the answers they need. So does the cat bylaw reflect on the dog and cat management legislation?
No.
It doesn't. So you don't draw up the legislation for that bylaw either?
No, I rely upon the head powers to create a regime with cats which is outside of the state legislation, but the Local Nuisance and Litter Control Act deals with cats significantly in relation to nuisance. You would have powers, your council officers would have enforcement powers there, just as they do with dogs under the Dog and Cat Management Act relating to nuisance.
Thank you very much, Paul. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Kelly or have any discussion in relation to recommendation 2? Certainly, Victoria wants to ask a clarifying question of Paul.
Through the Mayor, if I may, in regards to Councillor Kemp's question, because I'm conscious that for any of these bylaws to be passed, even for the purposes of public consultation, they must be unanimous. So we're back to square one if you're not in support of. But I just want to clarify that you're wanting to include nuisance dogs or barking dogs in the bylaw as a way of informing our community, where the bylaws actually are laws that the council can implement and enforce because the acts are silent. So what we're saying is the Dog and Cat Management Act gives you the instrument or the power to enforce any issues around barking dogs. And if it's information or informing of our community that you're looking for, then the bylaws aren't the way to do that. The bylaws are about setting laws that we don't have an instrument by way of a piece of legislation in place. So if you're wanting us to be more informative to our community members, we can find some other mechanisms to do that around barking dogs and how people deal with it and the processes they need to go through to help educate our community better on the current legislation. But am I understanding your query?
Yes, thank you, CEO. That's along the lines I was thinking of as how we could use the laws, and I now have a better appreciation of the requirements under legislation and how bylaws operate. Thank you.
If there's no further discussion or questions, I will put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Recommendation 3 is either 3A or 3B, and I understand, Councillor Quinton, that you want to move one of them.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to move the amended version, which I'm just trying to scroll madly through to figure out which one that is. I think it's the F1, the first one. Is that correct?
3A. Can you see it on the screen? Just make sure that that's the one that. Yep, attachment F1. Okay, so you want to move that? Do I have a seconder
Yes.
for that? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Quinton?
Yes, if I may. So to start with, I'll just briefly explain that the changes to the bylaw recommend having non-roaming pet cats, essentially. So it's not as strong as a containment policy, and it is a grandfathered amendment. So it will affect cats born after a certain date, which I think is the 1st of January 2024. The reason for making this change is to try and cover a broad range of things. Number one is to protect our native fauna from roaming pet cats, and also to protect our pet cats from serious injury and disease, and therefore increase their welfare. Historically, we've always thought that the significant disruption to native fauna was caused by feral cats and stray cats. However, this has been proved to be largely untrue. There was a CSIRO study in 2020 that collated evidence from 66 different studies relating to predation of pet cats, and found that pet cats actually have up to 52 times higher predation rates than feral cats. In Australia, on average, each roaming pet cat kills 40 native reptiles, 38 native birds and 32 native mammals every year. And here in this council area, we're very blessed to live amongst an exquisite natural environment. In a similar place to here in Mandurah in Western Australia, it was documented that 2 roaming cats caused the total breeding failure of a colony of more than 100 pairs of fairy terns. So down here, obviously living on this coastal environment with lots of beautiful shorebirds that are, and some of which are quite endangered. Again, it sort of emphasises the need for change. There's another perceived benefit of having a pet cat is that it will kill off introduced pest species, such as mice and rats. This study that I've referenced found that, and I quote, "There is no evidence that pet cats exert significant control of introduced species." And regardless, if you do manage to keep your pet cat inside, you should reasonably expect that it will hopefully kill any rats or mice in your house. As a vet, I'm obviously very fond of cats. I've got a cat myself. But I also see a lot of the negative effects of roaming pet cats. I see weekly cats hit by cars, cats bitten by snakes, cats bitten by dogs, cats bitten by other cats, cats that have been deliberately hurt or poisoned by neighbours, cats that have picked up diseases and parasites from roaming. So I can say with 100% confidence that making these amendments will increase cats' welfare and will massively reduce heartbreak to cat owners, and will also reduce expensive vet bills. 71% of all pet cats in Australia are allowed to roam, and of the remainder, most people don't actually realise that their cat does roam beyond the borders of their garden. In a study in Adelaide recently, 4 out of 10 cats were actually going outside at night when the owners thought that they were tucked up inside. I can go on a lot more, but I feel like I'll try and wrap this up. Biodiversity is a really critical thing that we're aware of now, and it is very negatively affected by roaming pet cats. Personally, I have a theory that the reduced biodiversity in my area has allowed black ants to become a very dominant species, and this is due to the reduced numbers of frogs and reptiles, and hunting from roaming pet cats has been a big problem in my neighbourhood. Most Australians are in favour of tighter regulations on roaming pet cats, I'm confident, having spoken to many people in the community, that ratepayers, a majority of ratepayers in this community agree. These proposed amendments are a bit of a change, but we do need to change our psychology to make it happen. It will be a challenge, and these amendments do give us time to be able to change and adapt. And that is all I have to say. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. You had 1 minute left. Councillor Mackenzie, do you want to speak to this? Does anybody else want to speak to this? Councillor Kemp?
Just a clarification question. I may have asked it on the previous question about these changes that Councillor Quinton's putting up. Are they already covered in the Cat and Dog Management Act? It's not?
No, they're not.
Okay, thank you very much.
If there's no further discussion, I'll put that recommendation to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. That's great. So those bylaws will now go out for community consultation. Those community members that are interested in looking at them more closely and making some suggestions, that will be your time. And thank you very much, Paul. Very much appreciate you taking the time to be with us tonight. We now move to 9.3, which is the review of our policy and procedures framework policy. And the recommendation is that Council adopt the reviewed policy and procedures framework policy with the recommended changes. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Do either of you want to speak to that? No? Councillor Quinton? No? Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Karimba?
Thank you, Mayor. I think that I would like to actually say that we postpone this vote because we don't have Councillor Burns here and he's had no input into these, and I know that he was very interested in this, so I think it's important that he gets his say as well.
I'll say no to that. These are going to be going out to, well, not this one, but the other ones that you're referring to will be going out to public consultation, and he's able to have his say. They'll be brought back to the council following public consultation. When somebody is on leave, we can't just stop what is on the agenda. And I know that all the councillors are very interested in the items that are coming up on the agenda. We've actually got 3 people that are on leave tonight, so we will continue with this. Do I have somebody to move that recommendation? Oh, I've done that, Councillor Schiller and Quinton. Does anybody else want to speak to it? No? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have the review of the Code of Practice for access to meetings and documents. And once again, this recommendation is proceeding us to public consultation, and it will be brought back to the chamber after the public consultation. So would somebody like to move that recommendation? So that's recommendation, it's done in point 1 and point 2. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Do either of you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Kemp?
Just a clarification. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. When's the expectation of this report come after public consultation back to the chamber for decision?
In June, I think.
Yeah, it's in June.
It's in June.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'll put it to the chamber. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Nine point 5 is the review of our supplementary election policy, and the recommendation is that Council adopts the reviewed supplementary elections policy as provided in the attachment A that you all have. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconding, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? No. Does anybody want to speak to that? Those in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. 9.6 is a new policy which relates to our aged, our workers working with aged care, and it's in response to the Royal Commission into Aged Care. It's the Serious Incident Response Policy. Someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Do either of you want to speak to it or have any questions? Or does anybody want to speak to it? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously then. 9.7 is the review of our light fleet plant and heavy vehicles changeover or replacement policy. And the recommendations that Council endorse the policy as provided on attachment A. Does somebody want to move that way? Councillor Kemp?
I move a formal motion for an adjournment on this policy. As I have requested in the past, I believe that we have to do a comparison on leasing of our vehicles compared to actually outright purchasing to see what the cost benefits are or any benefits at all. So that's the reason why I'd like this adjourned, so we can have a comparison study. Thank you.
Just through the Mayor, if I can just clarify that you're looking, I need to specify that you're looking to adjourn the debate on, well, there's no debate, but adjourn this item until a feasibility study is completed on the leasing of our light fleet vehicles.
Well, feasibility or report, whatever's the simplest one to come back to council with, at least cost to council to undertake that process so we can understand the implications of budgets to these, because a lot of costs involved here.
Yeah, and this obviously the difference will be between the operating budget and capital budget, where operating budget is impacted through leasing and capital budget through the purchase of the equipment.
Do I have a seconder for the formal motion? Councillor Krumbera. There's no debate on a formal motion. All those in favour of the formal motion? That's passed unanimously. Karimba. It's passed unanimously. 9.8 is the council assessment panel, the council member appointment. I'll first of all ask if there are any volunteers to go onto the council assessment panel. And if there are more than 2 volunteers, then I'll ask to appoint the Chief Executive Officer as returning officer. But I'll ask if there's any volunteers first. No. So what will happen is that we won't have a council.
Excuse me, Your Worship, if nobody's putting their hands up, I'll fill that position.
Are you sure, Councillor Schofield? Thank you very much. Are there any other volunteers? Is there anyone who would like to proxy Councillor Schofield if she can't attend? No. Councillor Quinton? Your proxy, Councillor Schofield, if you won't attend? Can't attend? So the recommendation then, recommendation 2 would be that Council appoint Councillor Schofield as the CAP member and Councillor Quinton, the council member representative, to be on the council panel. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And seconding that, Councillor Karimba. Do either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Quinton. (9.9) is the discretionary rebate applications. That's ECH Incorporated. And the recommendation is that Council deny the application for a discretionary 10% rebate for the 2022-23 financial year for the 64 assessments at multiple addresses owned by ECH. Does somebody want to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Karemba. And a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. The 9.10 is that Council receive and note the mayoral report from January to March. Someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconded, Councillor Quinton. Either of you want to speak to that or have any questions? Does anybody want to speak to that or have any questions? Those against? Carried, thank you. 10.1, Volunteer Week Small Grants Program. I'm going to do that on block unless anybody wants any of those particular volunteer groups removed from that. So would somebody like to move on block the volunteer groups? Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Declaring a general conflict of interest as I'm a member of the Carrigalinga Board of Management and I'm a member of Fluoro FM. As I do not gain any personal gain by this, I'll stay in the chamber and vote.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Congratulations to all of the Volunteer Week Small Grant recipients. I won't read them out as there are quite a lot of them, but it's just a small contribution so that they can have a volunteer celebration and say thank you. And I really would encourage elected members to go to any of their morning teas or any of the celebrations that they have. It's a great opportunity for us to say thank you on behalf of the City of Victor Harbor because our volunteers do such an amazing job. 10.2 is the Rock and Roll Festival pre-budget approval and transition planning. I'm happy to do this on block if you're happy to do it 0.1 and 2 on block. If someone would like to move that way. Councillor Karemba. And seconder, Councillor Quinton. Do either of you want to speak to those recommendations? Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to say that this Rock and Roll Festival is a good thing for the town. I think I'd like to see it continue. I'm a bit of a car enthusiast. I went to the McLaren Vale Classic Car charity event on Saturday night and obviously drank a little bit too much wine and bid on too many things. But these events really do mean a lot to the community and I'd like to see these continued. But obviously we need maybe council or for someone else to look after it now. And yeah, it'd be good to see it happen.
Thank you, Councillor Karemba. Councillor Quinton, did you want to say anything? Does anybody else want to say anything? Councillor Kemp.
Just a question again. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. This is a pre-budget commitment of 20,000 of our operating expenditure, and which will blow out the operating budget even further. Only 20,000, of course, but we have an offset of income of 5,000. How comes there's such a poor return on investment? You know, from 20,000 outlay for a 5,000 income when, you know, they're charged to attend and set up their stalls, etc., etc.
Mark, can you answer that one, please?
Sure. Through the Mayor, yes, there is some income received from stallholders. That's an element of that income. also from sponsorship as well. What we're finding is that the sponsorship market's getting harder and harder to solicit interest from. The event is a free public event, so there's no actual income from gate takings. I guess what we're presenting here is an income forecast that's reasonable without expending too many resources chasing money that's often not available. So I guess we're presenting a balanced perspective of things.
Did that answer your question, Councillor Kemp?
I'm sorry, no. I think, you know, if we go to spend this amount of community's money on this, and I understand the traders get something out of it, hopefully, the businesses will as well. But again, as the community needs to understand and want to know why, if we go to get some revenue, why isn't there better return on their money for these things? Because it's just constantly draining our operating budget purse. And we've got a lot of other subsidiaries in that where we spend a lot of money on, etc. as well. So I guess it's come to a situation of how many more events are we going to underwrite and subsidise. Yeah, but just a question, that's all it was, just to understand why we can't get further income.
Sorry, through the Mayor, if I may. We are always looking for other ways, obviously, and that's why we're looking at the review of contracting it out rather than council, obviously, expending funds. But it is $20,000 for an event. It's actually a small amount of money of what it brings in terms of economic value to the town. But take your points on board, and that's why we're looking at a change in the model.
Just a question for futuristic. Sorry, just a question for future. If we go to looking at the expression of interest for suitably skilled qualified individuals that undertake this, would this be subsidised by council? Is that a part of the plan to keep it subsidised as well, as we do with some other events? We keep subsidising even though council doesn't run them.
Through the Mayor, yes. So what we're recommending is that we go out to market, we capture some interest, we then come back to the council with the proposals we've received. A part of that to underpin the event in the near future, it's recommended, but not at this point, that council consider providing a grant in the form of the agreement that would underpin the event for the next 3 years. But as a part of the submission process, actually find out from the market ways the council can actually step back in terms of its financial contribution and make the event a bit more sustainable. And then it may be that into the longer term, the event actually form part of council's grants program, which then competes with every other event that happens in the city, which we provide money for.
Any further discussion? I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Victor Cinema State Heritage listing, and the recommendation is that council endorse the draft representation included as attachment C for submission to the State Heritage Council regarding our cinema. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Quinton. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Do either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I'll start with a question, if you don't mind. Something new. It's great that we go to recognise our Victor Cinema as a State Heritage listed building and area, but because we go be upgrading that in time as part of the Arts and Culture Centre, by having a heritage listed statement at the state level, what crystal balling of costs will that increase? Because when you start doing state heritage buildings, you know, the cost factor, it just blows out compared to if it wasn't heritage listed at the state level. Is any, someone can provide some answers to what possibly could be the cost blowouts?
Through the Mayor, I cannot give you an indication of the cost blowouts, but I can tell you that we've already had discussions because we have made it very aware to the Heritage Authority that we are looking at incorporating the cinema into our Arts and Cultural Precinct. And most of the design work that's already been done is trying to keep retain all of those modern Art Deco elements of the cinema. I think from my knowledge, the only area that probably will need to have some adjustments is the aesthetic appearance of the columns within the proscenium theatre area to retain the heritage elements. So yes, there probably will be some additional costs, but most of what we were planning on doing was retaining most of that heritage elements of the building.
Councillor Schiller?
Just a question, obviously trying to retrofit a building like that for access. Is this going to make any major difference to the current plans that we had regarding that?
At this stage, no. Again, they are well aware that we need to make it accessible to all, and they're aware of the lift provisions that we have in there, and that's internally. Most of it is around any changes that you would look to make to the external facade or some of those specific heritage art deco elements, but that doesn't impact the lift. We will certainly, they're aware of our number one priority is to make that accessible.
I've just got another question. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. It's just come to mind. As part of this process, is the old library or the arts centre now and the town hall, are they state heritage listed or just council heritage listed? Because I'm just wondering, because with the arts and cultural design of the entrance to those two buildings is really outside of the heritage listed protocols, I would have thought. Just your opinion on that?
Yeah, I need to take that on. I can't recall. I know they're either local heritage listed. I can't recall whether they're state heritage off the top of my head. It's either one or the other, and I'll need to take it on notice. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. That's,
Yeah.
Thank you. I guess the question, if it's local heritage, what are the rules around that? We're changing the facade on the outside.
They're not as stringent as they are with the state heritage components. Again, I'll need to take it to more detail on notice.
Is there any further discussion on that recommendation? Councillor Quinton, did you want to close the debate? No. I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Thank you. We now move to Victor Harbour Markets licence and agreement renewals. The first recommendation is relating to the farmers market operating at Grosvenor Gardens. And so I ask, would someone like to move recommendation 1?
I have a question, if I may, first, for discussion, so people may make their minds up depending on how discussion go. I'm just wondering whether we could have leave of the meeting to have 10-minute suspension of meeting procedures to talk about these 3 recommendations, because I feel that they're biased in some ways, where I believe that we either do it, or everyone goes out for expression of interest, not just one, and why does one market all of a sudden has to go for expression of interest, the other 2 don't? I think it'd be equitable and fair to our community. I think if we go out for expression of interest, we do it for all 3 markets, or we just, endorse or not endorse, depending on situations of each market separately. So I'm just wondering if that's worthwhile.
First of all, I'll ask Mark Priscilla to perhaps let you know why he's done each market differently. And then if you need further discussion about that, then I can put it to the floor, whether or not we take leave of the meeting.
Through the Mayor. The 3 markets are quite different, whilst the basis is they are a market. Both the farmers market and the beachside market operate under a licence agreement where we don't actually run the events. So that's probably the first difference between those 2. In terms of the artisan markets, that's actually an event that council owns, and so under this arrangement, we are simply seeking to extend the service agreement. With the artisan markets, that's an event that we've recently sought interest from the community to operate on our behalf. The intention of that is to be a self-funded arrangement. In terms of the other 2 markets, the farmers market is operated by, and as it explains in the report, is operated by a community organisation, has a quite well-established governance structure. That was set up by council some 20 odd years ago, I believe. and the beachside market is a private enterprise. Whilst it does provide support back to the community through a variety of events, the basis for going out to market for that particular event is the fact that it hasn't, council's not tested the market since 1994. And so whereas the other markets have been tested at some point in recent times. So I guess we've treated the three differently from that perspective. And at what point council's actually sought interest from the community to understand it's getting, I guess, the best value for its land.
Thank you.
Just a supplementary question, if I may, Mayor Jenkins. Thank you, Mr. Brisabella, but you said that this other market has been tested just recently. Have you got any dates when they were done?
So Artisan Markets, we went out less than 18 months ago for the market manager for that event. Scratching my head a little bit, the farmers market was commenced, maybe in the report, but
2008.
Yeah, so I guess the difference there is it's a non-for-profit organisation that runs the market, and so its emphasis is on giving back to the community, and so that's kind of why we're suggesting that market be extended for this duration of time.
Just a final question for me, just for the benefit of the chamber to understand how the debate may go. Do we have any policy or process in place that actually outlines, why we do this in the markets and what we give and why we don't give to some people, and protocols set up or various things like that? If I made myself clear, that do we have something in writing which the community can look at? Or also the fact is that, if one's for non-profit, how come they get it over someone who's for profit if they do give back to the community? So I'm just wondering, do you have anything in writing which actually lays out the whole process, how this markets are dealt with and how they're put to the community?
Through the Mayor, no. We do have a festivals and events policy of council. It doesn't talk explicitly to markets per se. I guess what we're suggesting in the case of the beachside markets, we're actually suggesting we use a similar framework to which we use for the artisan markets recruitment. And we ask similar questions to what we ask of events that council sponsor as well, to ensure there's consistency. And so with this example, we are suggesting we'll come back to the council. So we're not actually deciding this evening on the matter. We'll actually come back to the council and present the council with the options.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp, do you still want to go out of meeting procedures, or have they answered your questions?
Yes, my questions have been answered and it's given me some food for thought. I'm just wondering if any other elected member feels they prefer to have a bit of a discussion prior to having a 5-minute presentation from themselves on whether they support each of them or not. So I'll leave it up to the chamber if they feel they need more discussion.
Each member will have 5 minutes each and can ask supplementary questions if they want to. Councillor Schiller, you had your hand up.
I actually support David Kemp on the concept of going out of session, because obviously one of the markets, I've been approached today from the person running that market, so it would be nice to just have a candid conversation about that issue.
Certainly, if you put up your hand, if you'd like to go out of meeting procedure for 10 minutes. Yep, that's unanimous. Fine, that's good. Who would like to start the discussion? And Councillor Schiller, you said that you had some concerns?
Unfortunately, I got a telephone call only probably an hour or 3/4 of an hour prior to the meeting, so I was not able to research completely the differences and the previous history. Is it a question within my own comments is this particular, the beachside market, did this expression of interest go out 4 years ago? And how do we, obviously this particular person has been doing the market for several years, and we've got the balance between supporting someone who's been doing it on an ongoing basis, but also having that impartial system that you're obviously trying to put in place with the 4-year expression of interest, how that does travel over all aspects of council with making sure we're doing this correctly in all areas. And so it's a bit of an all-round question, but to be fair to the person, but also to make sure the processes are happening everywhere within council.
So to answer the question in relation to previous expressions of interest for the operation of a market on Soldiers Memorial Reserve, so no, council have actually not been out formally to request interest on the use of that site for a market. The council did some 4 or 5 years ago consider doing that. It then received a deputation from the operator of the beachside market, and the council decided to rescind that motion. So council didn't test the market at that point. So we're actually presenting this as an option, given that probably 6 or 7 months ago, there was some crossover with dates in relation to the artisan markets and the beachside market. And at the time, Councillor Kemp expressed a desire to look at uniformity between all of the markets. And so the report we're presenting tonight seeks to do that in terms of the fee settings of that, but also to ensure that we have actually not tested the market in recent times. Now, it's quite plausible that the existing operator does a wonderful job and that may be the best person or persons to actually deliver that market, and that's not being questioned here. We're suggesting that this gives the council some options as to what it might like to do and to understand what the market has to offer. And there's certainly the current market operator delivers a number of positive things for our community. And so that certainly may be grounds in terms of supporting that continuation under that operator. And today is really not to decide upon who that might be, but rather actually seeking interest from the community.
Does anybody, Councillor Schofield?
Yes, look, I do have some concerns with this. One of it, I think council has a conflict of interest. The thing is that we have 3 markets. One is run by a community group, one is run by a business, and the other is run by council. So you can't put them all in the same area. I agree with Councillor Kemp. I think in this case, until we have a policy or a set of rules that are going to guide us for markets, that these should be all treated exactly the same. So the 3 of them have to reapply, or the 3 of them are granted their leases.
Councillor Karimba?
Yeah, I just had a question. 4 years, is that, why is it 4 years? Is there a reason for that long period of time? Is there, is this something we agreed on before my time, or is it just a standard thing?
4 years has been a standard arrangement. I guess 4 years does provide whoever it is enough time to plan their business and to schedule their business accordingly, and obviously to solicit income for the event. So there's a degree of surety it provides.
Does anybody else have any questions or anything they'd like to say before we look at a mover? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I'm just wondering through the CEO that I raised the issue around about having some type of protocols or policies or written up in the major events or something about how markets are operated and how they're actually called for and etc. like that. Is it worthwhile looking at only giving maybe a 2-year extension or a 12-month extension with a review to provide the documentation and review on how we do markets and how we call for them and how we appoint people, etc., because we don't seem to have that documentation available to us. So how would you see, from your perspective, getting this documentation up ready within 12 months for us to come back in 12 months' time to review it all, and whether we call for expression of interest of all markets or provide a policy on actually giving extensions to all of them for an extra 4 years or whatever the policy comes back with? So is that a possibility?
Through the Mayor, absolutely, it is a possibility because there are quite clear differences between the markets, and obviously where we have markets at the moment, they're all obviously centrally located within the main town centre. So if that's the Chamber's wishes, absolutely you could do a shorter term. I'd probably maybe suggest 2 years. 1 year for the markets for all of the operators would be difficult to work within, and we certainly would be able to get something back to you within 12 months, but then implement it following that 2 year period would be my suggestion if that's the will of the Chamber to head down that track.
And thank you for that, CEO. I think that's a very positive move forward in that because they're all different in that sense, and there is one market which is still under subscribed by council. It needs to be looked at, I think, to be fair and equitable, to all market operators, no matter who they are. So I think we could seek your assistance in changing some of these recommendations. That'd be fantastic. I have finished, Mayor Jenkins. If anybody else wants to chat.
Does anybody else want to say anything? All right, we'll move back into meeting procedure if that's all right with you. Can I just have a hands back? Thank you. And you're wanting the CEO to... Just let the CEO look at those changes to see if that's what you'd like. Just fix my thumb. Councillor Kemp, in relation to this, what you could possibly do is you could do a 2 year extension, just change that 4 to 2, and then...
Yeah, I think all three need to be changed to 2, and it'd be a
Yeah,
fourth.
The third one doesn't actually have a time on it.
No, it needs to be put in a time. And I was suggesting that we have a fourth motion, which is about administration undertakes a review policy of the protocols around the markets. Something broad like that, where the CEO could actually incorporate it in an existing document or creates a new document within 2 years.
I'll let her work that out with Katie. While she's doing that, do you want to have a 5-minute break? Wriggle around? Can I have hands up for that? Or I'll see you back here at 25 past. if you're happy for those to be done on block, we can do them on block, or otherwise we can do them one by one. You had a question, Councillor Crimber?
So the first two are $200, but the third one's $300. Is that the reason for the difference in the fee?
So you'll see in the report it provides some context in terms of the land area, the number of markets, the number of stalls that are on those sites. So the fee is on the basis of occupied land and the business model of the market to fund it.
Would you like to do them on block, or do you want to do them one by one? Would somebody move either way? Councillor Kemp?
I'll move them on block. Can you just read them out? Oh, sorry, you already read them out. Sorry, yeah, by Angela. Yeah, I'll move on block. Thank you.
And for your benefit, Councillor Schofield, we've made them to 2-year extension on each one, and then a fourth recommendation that you can see up on the screen there, the administration develop a policy and guidelines. So moved by Councillor Kemp on block. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Schiller? Do either of you want to speak to them? Does anybody want to speak to it? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. We now go to commercial licence renewals for the Causeway Plaza precinct. And the recommendation is that approval be granted to the commercial licences for Girdler Amusements, A1 Amusements, Strawberries Galore, I won't repeat them all, for 4 years until 30th of June. Moving that way, Councillor Schofield. Seconding that, Councillor Kemp. Do either of you want to speak to that? All those, Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, thank you. Considering that we've got some strategic planning coming up about possibilities of sites and what we're going to be doing, the open space strategy around, you know, what we're going to be doing with the foreshore car park, et cetera, in our long-term plans and everything. Would 4 years is too short a time or too long a time? Because if we make changes in our planning, then that may affect the licence.
Down the bottom, just prior to the risk assessment, we've got council has the ability via the terms and conditions in each of the licence agreements to negotiate changes to tenure and conditions. So if that needs to be changed, it can be.
Thank you. And one question, what's the difference between a licence for these storeholders compared to lease arrangements with community groups? So I know there's an agenda coming up a bit later on about some community sheds. So what's the difference now while we're on the subject of licence and leases?
Is this talking to the motion? I'll let you have it, but it's squeezed in, holding its breath in.
Thank you, through the Mayor. In this case, the licence, I guess council owns the land and grants a licence. The leases are a building that you're talking about, the leases later, the sheds. Yeah, so putting a renting a shed on council land as opposed to these folks who just have a space.
Okay, so we've got Schofield and Kemp with the recommendation. Does anybody else want to speak to it? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? The licence renewal for the display of artwork on Warland Reserve. I'll take that recommendation as read. Would someone like to move that way? Otherwise it will lapse for want of a mover. Councillor Schiller, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Schofield, do either of you want to speak to that? No? Yes, Schofield?
Look, I have supported this because it is, again, within our artisans. But I do have a small issue, and I don't know whether, no, I better not bring it up because it's not in relation in what I've got in front of me. But I I do support it.
Thank you, councillor Schofield. Any further discussion? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 5.3, licence renewal for the community storage sheds. And the recommendation that approval be granted to those community groups listed below. Someone like to move that? I know it's 7:30, but you're taking a long time to move things. Thank you, councillor Schofield. Thank you, councillor Kemp, seconding it. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. Just a clarification around licence and leasing, as the Director Hayter said that when we give a licence on a space, that these sheds are owned by the community organisation like Encounter Bay Rotary Club. So shouldn't that be a lease arrangement, because they're leasing a shed which is owned by them on council land compared to a licence?
Kathy?
Thank you, councillor Kemp. Oh, sorry, through the mayor, the clarification. Yes, you're right. The lease is coming up a little later.
Thank you for that. And so I'm not quite sure how this recommendation then goes for the licence then on this one for the storage sheds. And secondly, I have a conflict of interest, a genuine one, because I'm a member of the Encounter Bay Rotary Club. I'll stay in the chamber and I will vote on the matter.
Is there any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. 12.4, bridge renaming, Nettle Hill Road Bridge to Browns Bridge. And because if you say no to the first one, the second one is no. If you say yes to the first one, yep, they can go on block. Moving that way, councillor Quinton. And seconding that. Thank you, councillor McKenzie. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
Yeah, just a clarification, please. Because we're renaming a bridge, do we need to go and inform the community? Because I'm just taking on board what Mr. Brian Littley said earlier on about council doing various things and not consulting with people who may be affected in the area. I'm just wondering, does that apply to renaming of bridges or reserves, etc., etc.? Thank you.
Thank you, through the mayor. No, councillor Kemp, there's a range of, on page 240, there is a range of things that we do need to do, including gazette and notify our community, but we don't need to do pre-consultation.
Any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. This is Katie's favourite item. So we have 17 recommendations here. The way that I'll deal with this is that if anybody wants any of those recommendations taken out and dealt with separately, we can do that. Otherwise, I'll do them all on block. So are there any recommendations that you'd like taken out of this list of 17 to do separately? Councillor Coimbra?
Just the Encounter Bay Football Club.
You don't want that to be, can I ask you why you want that taken out?
I'm just wondering, so we're trying to go with the gather round scenario. We're trying to bring more people here. Why is the Victor Harbor Football Club been chosen over Encounter Bay Football Club when it comes to, say, the gather round? Just interested if there's any reason for that.
Can I, through the mayor, it hasn't. I even have been publicly stated that Encounter Bay has hosted an AFL game before. Okay. Either of the clubs are capable of hosting an AFL game, and we would be presenting both facilities as an option if we were to explore the gather round.
Right, so then wouldn't a scoreboard sort of be something that they would probably need to then be ones that possibly get that game if it does come down here?
I can't answer that question in
don't
terms
know.
of the AFL.
No.
I know with the Sandfell games, both, again, clubs are making themselves ready to host
Sure.
Sandfell games, country championships. They're both trying to be at that level.
Okay, thanks.
You happy for that to stay in?
I'd like to vote on it separately. If we
You'd
could.
like to vote on it
Please.
separately? All right. What number is that, Carlos?
Number 9. I think, hang on.
No, number 9
sorry.
is the boxing
I'm looking at the,
championships.
yeah, sorry, I'm looking at the actual description.
There's nothing in there for the footy club.
Oh, isn't there? Oh, my
No,
apologies. I'm
it
looking
didn't,
at.
it didn't get in.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay.
That's fine. I'm blocked then. Thanks.
On block. So would somebody like to move that on block? Councillor Schiller? And seconded by Councillor Quinton. Do either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Quinton?
Just to say that we evaluated, I was part of the panel that decided that, and we did evaluate each proposal individually, and the Encounter Bay Football Club wasn't eligible by the guidelines, and that's why it was left out of this one.
Any further discussion, Councillor Kemp?
Just clarification, and I may have a general conflict of interest being the chair of the committee who's took these grants, even though I don't make any or anything personal out of it, but there may be some perception of bias as a chair of a committee. But not everyone got a grant. I'm not quite sure if that fits or not. It doesn't. I thought so, but just to clarify, it's been a long day.
You're doing well. Councillor Mackenzie, do you want to say anything? No, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if I put your hand up. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. And I think all of those are really all the sporting groups that got grants and the individuals are very, very well deserving. And thank you very much to the committee that you were chairing, Councillor Kemp. I think that it would have been a really hard job to go through them because we only have a certain bucket of money. And unfortunately, we can't give everybody everything that they want. And I think the committee did a stellar job. So thank you very much. Now we move to renaming sections of Franklin Parade to Bluff Jetty Road and Jagger Road to Franklin Parade. The first recommendation, would someone like to move that? Thank you, Councillor Quinton. And seconding that? Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp?
I'm not quite sure whether I'll support this or not because I'm just wondering what the impact will be on residents in changing their addresses everywhere to all organisations they have to notify. So I'm just wondering how many residents may be impacted by the name changes. I know one road won't impact, but the other may.
Sorry, through the Mayor. It's 3 residences that it will impact, and it's really just correcting a historic error. So there is no mix up in their addresses.
Any further discussion? Put that to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? Thank you. That's carried. And the second one, renaming 125 metres of Jagger Road. Would someone like to move that one? Councillor Kemp. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Quinton. Either of you want to speak to it? Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Minutes of council committee meetings. This is the Disability Access and Inclusion Advisory Committee meeting. Would someone like to move the recommendation that the minutes be received and noted? Councillor Schiller and Councillor Quinton seconding that. Either of you want to speak to the minutes? Councillor Schiller?
just give a big plug for the Disability Expo that's in the minutes, and it'd be great if some of our elected members and senior people attended that, because it's not just about people with disabilities, about inclusion, and the more people interact with people with disabilities, you will get to know more about the circumstances that they face.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Councillor Quinton, did you want to say anything about that? And all those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. Item 3 of the minutes talks about the request from the committee for the installation of an accessible car parking at Victor Harbour Dog Park entrance be added for future budget considerations. But the second paragraph talks about already negotiations for purchase. I'm not quite sure if that is a confidential item, or should it be a confidential item?
Through the Mayor, no, it's not a confidential item. That's referring to the Armstrong Road land, which has already been purchased. So I think that was an update at the time. This has been on their agenda since 2021.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I will put the motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? It's carried. Thank you. Rec Centre Management Committee meeting, and the recommendation is that council receive and note the minutes. You moving that way, Councillor Mackenzie? Thank you. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Quinton. Either of you want to speak to that? Anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Yes, I know it's a mid-year review, or a second budget review. It talks about $348,499 surplus predicted for the end of the financial year. Generally speaking, those surpluses of subsidiaries come back to council under their share cost arrangement of percentages. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, it's actually not a subsidiary. I mean, it's a Section 41. It doesn't actually have any financial delegations. It would have been a provision in the budget. I think it's for the replacement of their floor for one of the stadiums.
Sorry, my apologies. Which one?
You're on Frawa, I think.
I'm on the wrong one. I'll just reserve that question to next.
Okay, so that's the receiving a note of the minutes of the Rec Centre Management Committee meeting. Moved by Councillor Mackenzie, seconded by Councillor Quinton. Anybody have anything to say? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Now you're moving the next one, aren't you, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, thank you.
And this is the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority's Financial Performance Report and Second Budget Review. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Karembo. Do either of you want to speak to that?
Again, I'll rephrase my question about the surplus of 348,000 is predicted for the end of the financial year, but there's no changes to council contributions. So I'm just wondering, will we receive our percentage share back, which is a requirement under the constitution of the subsidiaries to provide that funds back to council? Or have you had any indication that they may want to keep it like they did last financial year?
Haven't had any indication, but it isn't actually a requirement under their charters to give it back to the councils. It says it may if the councils request it back, or it then will actually subsidise the ongoing contributions by the councils, and it's calculated on the formula of the distribution of the services of FRAWA as well. But I haven't received anything at this stage as to their plans for the 23-24 budget.
So currently in our draft budget, we do have a figure which has increased from last financial year for FRAWA. So that's a percentage increase. We have an indication what that percentage may be, somewhere like 5%, 10% on last year's budget.
I would have to take that question on notice. I can't recall at this stage.
All right, and we'll have an opportunity to debate the FRAWA at the end of the financial year, whether we seek that money back to offset our contributions.
The council can.
Yep, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Karembo, did you want to say anything? Does anybody else want to contribute to the debate? No, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. There are no matters of urgency. There are no questions on notice. I have a, no, it's a motion without notice. No. Are there any questions without notice? Angela Schiller and then Councillor Karemba. Angela?
My question relates to the disability car parking issue that we had earlier in the year, and asking whether any written request was given to the Victor Central Shopping Centre to seek retrospective council approval or development approval to remove the car parks, and whether that's been done and when it was done.
I'm happy to take the question on notice, Councillor Schiller, because that item was discussed in confidence.
Councillor Karemba.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of questions. The FRACA at the moment is obviously a pretty big topic. It's been written about in the local papers. I've had conversations with councillors from Alexandrina. They're really concerned, as I am, about the losses. Do we know exactly what the loss will be this year for the FRACA? What our contribution will be as a council?
Are you talking about losses or
contribution? Yeah, what they're asking.
What our contribution will be?
Yeah.
Kelly?
I'm sort of asking because I know one of the councillors in their meeting actually suggested mothballing the centre, and I'm just with all this money coming out of council, and it's obviously for worthy causes. At what point do we, have to bite the bullet, I guess, and decide whether it's a, a viable option?
Through the Mayor, so at the moment we have an amount in the March budget review come to council around $725,000 as council's contribution. Not all of that is a cash contribution, some of that is the equity. Okay. So council makes a contribution in cash towards the centre, and then there's a book transaction essentially that equals half of the depreciation.
Okay. And do we know, because I did hear that they were actually going to be asking for more money, or is that included in this 725K?
So through the Mayor, the Q2 budget review that has gone up to Alexandrina Council and will come to this council at the next meeting is requesting additional funds for electricity as an additional $120,000 for electricity. Subsequent to that though, from inside information, because I'm currently helping with some of that works, there is a reduction because of the revaluation of land and buildings in depreciation. So there is an offset, but it won't come through until we get the third budget review, and I'd be looking at presenting both of those together to this council. Okay,
and I know that, we've been told on several occasions that, council is in the business of making money, and I totally understand that, and we provide services. But what do we have a figure where we say, look, it's just not sustainable anymore? Is that something that may have been entertained in discussions when it comes to, like, is it a million? Is it 2 million? And what does that equate to in rate increases?
The longer term prospects of the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre, when it was actually planned by both councils back in 2015, but it was way before then, there was always projected a contribution would be made by both councils for the lifetime of the swimming centre. Yeah. That's why governments run swimming centres, because they aren't really profit-making machines. They are a service, and they actually add to the health and well-being of its community. That's the value, not the dollar value of return on investment. It's not a private commercial enterprise. The FRACA is currently undertaking a review of its management models to look at more sustainable ways of maybe reducing some of those costs, but there will always need to be a contribution made by the council unless there's some other business profit-making enterprise within it.
Okay, yeah, I understand it'll always be a loss. I was just asking is what do we say as a council is an acceptable loss? That was what I was trying to allude
And this
to.
is part of the plan of the FRACA. The FRACA board has for some time. They've done some good work in looking at cost savings. Solar energy is one of those. Its biggest cost is energy costs, and that's not changing. So its project that it's currently gone out for tender at the moment is looking at installation of additional solar panels so it can be have its own source of energy, and that would actually reduce costs significantly.
Yeah, and there's going to be some rather large bills coming with regards to, say, equipment upgrade, some of their infrastructure, from my understanding.
There are some upgrades, again, through inside knowledge, because I was acting for a 3-week period.
Yeah.
There is some small infrastructure replacement, nothing major.
Nothing major?
No.
No, okay. And then my other question is regarding the Keene Road Bridge. Did we undertake a traffic management survey to understand the volume of traffic that goes over that bridge? I mean, I've heard a lot of people say that a lot of people use it, but is there a report being done of actually how many people and who uses the bridge?
Through the Mayor, thanks, Councillor Corimba. I'll need to take that on notice and come back to you.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to be able to, just to better get some background and so make a better educated vote as to, you know, whether it's a good idea to go forward or not. But yeah, that was basically it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions without notice? There are no motions on notice, and I have a motion without notice that I foreshadowed earlier on. And my motion on notice is that Council investigate the opportunity for Victor Harbor to host a regional Australian part of the gather round concept over the next 3 years. I think that with the success of the AFL gather round played in South Australia over the weekend, including Mount Barker, I think it's important that we lobby the state government for Victor to host one of the next 3 AFL gather rounds that are coming to SA. However, I think we need to find out how much it's going to cost the community and whether or not the Victor Harbor Ovals would be appropriate to use that are of AFL standard and which football club might want to be involved, including lighting. Part of us investigating this would also be writing and including the Yankalilla and Alexandrina councils, members of parliament in the region, so that they can also assist in lobbying state government to host the round. I believe it wouldn't be just beneficial for Victor Harbor, but also for the whole Fleurieu. And if you think about the publicity that the gather round got for Mount Barker, if we could get that down here, and if you think about the publicity that the Tour de France, the Tour Down Under gets for the Fleurieu, if we were to do something like that down here for the gather round, it would be fabulous for a whole region as well. So that's my motion without notice, if somebody wants to second that. Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Do you want to speak to it?
Just that I think it's a great idea and fully support it.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to it? No, I of course can't vote for it. All those in favour? Those against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Are there any others without notice? We now move into confidential items, and so the first recommendation is that we move into confidence because the item being discussed is commercial information of a confidential nature, the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to prejudice the commercial position of the person who supplied the information. Do I have someone to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Seconding, Councillor Quinton. Anyone want to speak to that? You want to speak to that, Councillor Schiller? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Thank you very much to all of those that are listening online. Bid you good night and thank you to the gallery.